The Galactic Council's security checkpoint hummed with the usual afternoon traffic. Matilda watched from her position near the human diplomatic quarters as various species shuffled through the scanners. Vrixian traders with their crystalline exoskeletons, Caltharian merchants floating in their containment spheres, and the occasional Dronthi delegate lumbering on 6 legs. Station Security Chief Zalthor, a towering craven with deep purple scales and 4 eyes that could track multiple threats simultaneously, prided himself on maintaining order. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where hesitation meant death. For 3 cycles he had kept this sector incident-free, and he wasn't about to let some primitive species change that. When Johnson approached the checkpoint with 2 creatures flanking him, Zalthor's dorsal plates instinctively flared. The human male was unremarkable by most standards. Average height, brown hair, wearing the simple jumpsuit of a cargo handler. But the beast beside him made Zalthor's primary hand drift toward his plasma pistol. They were quadrupeds, covered in brown and black fur, with ears that swiveled independently and eyes that tracked everything. Their mouths hung slightly open, revealing impressive arrays of teeth. Each weighed perhaps 30 kilograms, compact bundles of muscle that moved with predatory grace. "Halt," Zalthor commanded, his translator rendering the word in Standard Galactic. "Unregistered fauna are prohibited in council space." Johnson stopped, his posture relaxed, almost amused. "They're registered, Chief. Check your datapad. Service animals authorized by Human Ambassador Chen 3 days ago." Zalthor's lower left hand brought up the holographic display. The authorization was indeed there, filed properly with all appropriate documentation. His irritation grew. Humans had been council members for barely 2 standard years. Yet they seemed determined to push every boundary, test every regulation. "Service animals," Zalthor repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "What service do these creatures provide?" "Security and emotional support," Johnson replied evenly. "Meet Max and Ruby, they're dogs, specifically Belgian Malinois. They've been with me since I started working on the station." The creatures, dogs, remained perfectly still, but Zalthor noticed their eyes never left him. It was unsettling, being watched with such focused intensity by something that clearly recognized him as a threat. "They appear aggressive," Zalthor stated. He had read the incident reports from other stations. Humans and their animals were becoming a recurring problem. Just last cycle, a cat had somehow infiltrated a Caltharian diplomatic suite and terrorized 3 ambassadors before being captured. Johnson shook his head. "They're just alert. It's what they're trained for." Matilda had been observing the exchange from her post, but now she moved closer. She'd worked with Johnson for 6 months and had grown fond of Max and Ruby. The dogs had an uncanny ability to sense trouble before it happened, a trait that had proven invaluable in the station's rougher sections. "Chief." "Zalthor," she called out, her voice carrying the slight accent of someone raised on Mars colony. "There's no problem here. Johnson and his dogs pass through twice daily. They're harmless." Zalthor's eyes swiveled to fix her with 2 of his 4 pupils. "Harmless? I have reports from 17 systems documenting human-animal attacks, injuries, property damage. 1 Vrixian ambassador required medical intervention after encountering a hamster." "That was a misunderstanding about appropriate containment," Matilda said diplomatically, though she suppressed a smile remembering that particular incident report. Johnson remained calm, but his dogs had begun to shift their weight slightly. Their eyes never left Zalthor, and a low, barely audible sound emanated from their chests. "Why are they growling at me?" Zalthor demanded, his secondary hand now also moving toward his weapon. The sound triggered something primal in his predator brain, a challenge from another apex species. "Because you're reaching for your gun," Johnson said simply, his tone still conversational but with an edge of steel beneath it. Zalthor froze. He glanced down and realized both his primary and secondary hands had indeed moved to his weapons belt, an unconscious response to the perceived threat. The dogs hadn't attacked, hadn't even barked loudly. They had simply responded to his hostile intent with a warning. "They're reading your body language," Matilda explained, moving to stand beside Johnson. "Dogs evolved alongside humans for thousands of years. They're incredibly attuned to intent, emotion, and threat assessment. Max and Ruby can tell when someone's about to become violent, often before the person themselves realizes it." Zalthor's dorsal plates flattened slightly, a sign of confusion among Craven. "They can sense intent?" More than that, Johnson said. They can smell hormonal changes that indicate stress, fear, or aggression. They can read micro-expressions and body language across dozens of species. Ruby once alerted me to a faulty plasma conduit 2 decks away. She smelled the ionization before the sensors detected it. The security chief slowly, deliberately moved his hands away from his weapons and held them at his sides in a neutral position. Immediately the growling stopped. Max and Ruby's postures relaxed, though they remained watchful. Remarkable, Zalthor muttered. He had encountered many species across the galaxy, but this was different. These weren't sentient beings with language and technology. They were animals that had somehow developed an almost supernatural ability to interface with their human partners. The thing about dogs, Chief, Matilda said, her voice softening, is that they don't see threats the way we do. They see pack. Johnson is their pack leader, and they'll defend him against anything they perceive as dangerous. But they're not aggressive, they're protective. There's a difference. Johnson reached down and placed a hand on each dog's head. The transformation was immediate. Their entire demeanor shifted from alert guards to affectionate companions. Tails wagged, and Ruby even let her tongue loll out in what Matilda had learned to recognize as a canine smile. You see, Johnson continued, humans didn't just domesticate dogs. We co-evolved with them. They made us better hunters, better survivors. We made them smarter, more adaptable. The bond goes deeper than training or genetics. It's built into both our species at a fundamental level. Zalthor processed this information. The Kraven had dominated their world alone, needing no allies or companions. The concept of such a deep interspecies bond was alien to him, yet undeniably effective. Proceed, he finally said, gesturing toward the checkpoint. But I will be filing a report recommending further study of these dogs. As Johnson walked through with Max and Ruby, Matilda caught Zalthor's eye. You know what the scariest thing about humans is, Chief? What? He asked, genuinely curious now. It's not their weapons or their technology. It's their ability to turn former predators into family members, and those family members will die protecting them without hesitation. Humans didn't conquer their world alone. They brought friends. Zalthor watched the human and his dogs disappear down the corridor, and for the first time in his career, he wondered if the Council truly understood what they had accepted when humanity joined their ranks. It wasn't just one species, it was an entire ecosystem of loyal companions, each bringing their own unique advantages. He made a mental note to never, ever reach for his weapon around those dogs again.